My name is Fernando Pages. I'm co-chair of CNU Latino, and I'll be the moderator for this meeting. We'll be discussing two bills before the Texas legislature. We'll be discussing House Bill 878 and 369. House Bill 878 proposes reforms to zoning and land use regulations across Texas to streamline processes for local governments and developers. Key provisions include limiting the scope of zoning overlays, clarifying development rights, and enhancing consistency between municipal codes and state law. HB 369 focuses on housing affordability, and this bill introduces measures to address barriers to residential development. It includes mandates for both local governments to allocate a percentage of land for affordable housing projects and incentives for private developers to integrate affordable units into their plans. Both bills reflect Texas legislature's attempts to balance growth management with housing demands while addressing some inefficiencies in local governance. Many of you are joining because you're planners and you would like to have APA credit for this session. Please place your email, your name, and your email address in the chat so that we can get you your CM credits, certification maintenance credits for this attendance. So please do that in the chat, and then we will take those names and forward them to the right people. So before I introduce our guest, just again, a firm saludo and feliz año nuevo from CNU Latino. We are the Congress for the New Urbanism's Latino group, co-sponsor here in this webinar, and you are welcome to check us out by just going to our website, cnulatino.org. And if you are interested, you'd be welcome to join. We are co-sponsoring this meeting with CNU North Texas and CNU Houston. And both organizations would like to just say a couple of words. So we'll start with Peter Xiao, speaking briefly for CNU North Texas.
Thank you, Fernando. Good afternoon, everyone. As you mentioned, I'm Peter Xiao from the president of the CNU North Texas chapter. First, I want to thank Fernando and CNU Latino for including us and helping to plan this event. I'm looking forward to hopefully doing future collaborations on events similar to this and others. Thank you to our guest, Kim Mickelson, for her time to present. The CNU North Texas board is hard at work this year planning events for this coming year, including additional webinars, some panel discussions, site visits, and social events. So we welcome everyone from North Texas to join us. We have a LinkedIn and Facebook pages where we promote information on our events and other things going on in North Texas. We are also planning to grow our social media presence early this year so we can continue to spread word about our events. You can reach us at our website, cnu-ntx.org, or you can reach us directly at cnuntx@gmail.com. If you are in the North Texas region and you want to be involved, please feel free to reach out, again, by emailing us at cnu@gmail.com or through our website, cnu-ntx.org. We're always looking for members' participation. And thank you all for your time, and we look forward to this discussion.
Very good. Now, Matthew Camp, Houston, would like to say a few words, too, about his organization.
Good morning. Thank you for having us. I'm glad to be a part of this. For those who don't know, CNU Houston is a current and active chapter. We've been a chapter for probably 15 plus years, and we are currently looking to kind of restructure and get some new members aboard. We have worked with the city previously on projects like the Walkable Places Ordinance and recently the Livable Places, which kind of deals with a similar topic of cottage court housing, minimum lot size, accessory dwelling units, and what they're calling kind of a small multifamily from 3 to 8 units on a single lot. So we've been I had the good fortune of sitting in on that board, and some of our other members have been pretty active in the comments and influencing people on that committee. And we're always looking for people to kind of join in and help share their voice on the matter. Right now, probably the best way to get a hold of us is through our Facebook page. It's just CNU Houston. While we're revamping our website, if you just go to Facebook, send me a message, and I can reach out and then add you onto our emailing list. And you can see some upcoming events that we're going to have, some happy hours and some other lectures coming up in the next couple of months.
Excellent. And joining the local chapter of CNU is a great way to be involved both on a local and a national level simultaneously. So, and good organizations fund people too. So, with that, we're going to move on to our special presentation, and I'm going to introduce our special guest, Kim Mickelson. Kim Mickelson is a distinguished attorney and an urban planner with land use, real estate development, economic development, and municipal law background. She is a senior assistant city attorney for the city of Houston, providing legal counsel on planning and development matters. Ms. Mickelson's career encompasses legal practice and academic contributions. She served as counsel at Olson & Olson in Houston, representing municipalities across Texas in land use and historic preservation issues, economic development, airport law, special districts, cemetery, and nonprofit corporation law. In academia, Kim has been a visiting associate professor in the Masters of Urban Planning program at Texas A&M University's College of Architecture and at Texas Southern University, TSU, a historically black college in Houston. Go Tigers! And that's a direct quote from Kim this morning when I was speaking with her. She taught at the Urban Planning and Environmental Policy Department there at TSU. Her leadership roles with professional organizations are very notable. She is the immediate past president of the Texas chapter of American Planning Association and has served as the Region 3 commissioner for the American Institute of Certified Planners. Ms. Mickelson is an honors graduate of the prestigious Plan 2 Interdisciplinary Honors Program at the University of Texas, the University of Texas School of Law, and the Lyndon B. Johnson School of Public Affairs. She studied municipal and historic preservation practices internationally, including in Poland, Germany, and the former Yugoslavia. Beyond her professional endeavors, Kim is a fiber and glass artist and supports other artists with legal matters. And she's also an avid Texas Longhorns fan, which as an A&M graduate, I think is a conflict of interest, isn't it, Kim?
Yeah. Well, someone has to teach those Aggies was what I always said. But thank you. Wow. I may need to have that set aside. That was quite an introduction. Thank you. I do want to correct one thing. I'm not the immediate past president. I'm sorry, Fernando, I didn't catch that in the draft. I was chapter president before I went on to the AIC commission that would have been back 17-19 time
17,
frame.
that's a pretty...
Yeah, I'm that old. But thank you for the introduction, and thank you for CNU for hosting this, and thank everybody. I see just an incredible number of people on here, so it's great to see that there's that much interest in advocacy. So thank you very much. I'll speak more about that as we go through the discussion here.
Well, good. Since you introduced the concept of advocacy, before we get into the specific bills that we're here to discuss, would you give us kind of an overview of the legislative process and how it works in Texas and what advocacy role the American Planning Association of Texas plays in that legislative process?
Happy to do so. So we started at APA Texas. We started talking about advocacy in the mid-teens in 2013, 14, 15. And during my presidency there, I made an effort to really bring that to the forefront, start talking about this, start educating legislators, getting planners to the legislature to talk about the impacts of what they do there on local communities. And the subsequent presidents of APA Texas, Doug McDonald, Chance Sparks, Heather Nick, and now in Kelly Porter's term as chapter president, have continued those advocacy efforts. I want to do a shout out to the folks who have really developed APA Texas's advocacy program. And I don't know if any of them are on this webinar, but Karen Waltz, Kimberly Miller, Craig Farmer, and Carissa Cox, the first three really in the North Texas area, and then Carissa is in San Antonio, have done an incredible job of organizing topic-specific committees to monitor legislation, get comments out, get people to the Capitol to help train people to talk to their legislators and so forth. And I encourage all of you, we are always looking for, I won't call it partners in crime, maybe, but, folks and organizations to participate with. So if you're on this webinar, then I hope it means you're interested in what happens in Austin at the legislature in general. And I invite you to go to texas.planning.org, and you can click on the policy page and look at the legislative website. We're gearing up, obviously, for this session and have, 5 committee areas for specific subject matter, including things, development character, economic development, housing, and so forth. So obviously, the 2 bills we're going to talk about today will be 2 we are monitoring this session. To give you an idea, just a little bit about the Texas legislature, you all probably heard it meets every other year in the odd-numbered years for 140 days. And it's amazing the amount of work they can do and damage they might inflict on what we then have to deal with in the aftermath. But in the last legislative session, over 8,000 bills were filed during the session. Only 1,169 of those passed, and of those, Texas APA monitored 262. We partnered with different groups, including TML, including the home builders, to work on bills. And when I say we, I mean that in the broader sense of our advocacy committee group's work. This year, for this 89th session, November 11th was the first day that legislators and legislators-elect, even if they had not been sworn in, which didn't happen until the 1st, could file bills. And the legislature convenes coming up next week on Tuesday, January 14th. So from there, it starts to move really quickly. And we saw an initial rush of bills around the 11th, that first week. I want to say there were something like 1,500 bills filed, many of which did start to impact potentially or affect, open the discussion on planning issues. So March 14th will be the 68-day deadline for bill filing. After that date, technically no new bills can be filed. It means that that's when we really have to pay attention. So if you're monitoring these bills for your work, that's when things can really start happening, because committee hearings will occur. They will make amendments. They'll combine bills. They'll get revisions. Committee substitutes will come out and so forth. So it really starts to generate with some intense activity in March and April. May, June 2nd this year, it's a little odd. Usually the legislature lets out around Memorial Day. It's a little later this year, June 2nd. So it's the last day of the legislative session. Thereafter, we may have special sessions. You just never know. Depends on what gets done in the legislature according to the governor's priorities. But the point of really emphasizing the number of bills that got filed last session and the number that passed shows you how hard it is. 8,046 to 1,169 bills got filed. So it's and the governor vetoed, I want to say, so that was actually a large number that got kicked back out. It's very tough. It's very tough going through the process. So everything that gets filed, everything that has been filed is not going to get passed. Hopefully, well, we'll see. We'll talk about the 2 bills today and then talk a little bit about what happens with them.
Now, how does somebody's listening today and wants to get involved? They go to your website, they look at the bills, they say, well, this one in particular or that one in particular is of interest. What does it look like when you're asking for support? What would that support look like? What would that person do? Contact you? Do what?
So certainly we'd love you to reach out to our advocacy co-chairs, and you can do that through me if you want. And I'm happy to link everybody together with that. But happy to, we'd love to have you come in and say, send us an email and say, I'd like to be involved with, these topics. We have transportation, economic development, housing, development character, and annexation ETJ issues, subcommittee issues. So we cover a large variety of those, but certainly, reach out to, again, Karen Waltz, I will say, I think has really stepped back, but Carissa Cox, Craig Farmer, and Kimberly Miller, I'm sure Karen would help as well, or myself, and we'll get you in touch with the right committee to get involved. We'd love to have people who want to share their assessments, their analysis of bills, and undertake that, because even at 262, that's a lot of bills for even, fairly large groups to analyze and cover. We want you to help write testimony, appear at the hearings on the bills. That really does help and make an impact. And we're happy to get you in touch or show you how to get in touch with your local legislators.
Well, good. That sounds like a very active and involvement for anyone that wants that. It sounds like you need people to read the bills, understand them, comment on them internally, and then perhaps even show up and testify. It's a good experience too. It's a good experience too. So let's get into the bills that we're talking about, HB 878 and 369. Can you, going one at a time, what these bills aim to accomplish, why they're significant for Texas, and if you could address any current challenges in land use and housing policy that these bills might help to resolve or complicate further?
Yeah, to me, and let me clarify just a little bit here. When I'm going through this analysis today, this is Mickelson on municipal policy. This is not necessarily the position of the city of Houston or the city legal department. Not submitted analyses of these two bills yet. So, we're still evaluating what those might look like. But as everybody, I think, on this call probably knows, there's been, I think, kind of a convergence of two almost competing desires or pushes in the legislature, maybe generated from the same. But on the one hand, the legislature seems to want to limit what cities can do and really preempt their role, prohibit them from passing certain kinds of legislation. On the other hand, the legislature seems to acknowledge that there is an affordable housing problem, an overall housing problem within many areas of the state. So the question is, how are they trying to resolve that? We know from the bills we've seen in previous sessions that what I think a lot of legislators and legislative staff hear is that the problem with development, the problem with fast or timely development, or the problem with affordable development is the local governments who are imposing regulations because we want to, take care of the environment or make sure that safe structures are built and inspected properly. And there's been a pushback, and we've seen it with things like the subdivision shot clock or the ability of landowners to get out of the ETJ. Like if they have a free-for-all with no rules, that will make housing cheaper and better and faster. I'm not sure how they're going to reconcile that. And I think these two bills are almost on each of those ends. One, I think,
Would you like to use your PowerPoint when you're discussing them?
So I did a quick PowerPoint just that kind of outlines this. I'm happy to share that as we kind of walk through. Let me look for that.
And when we get back to it, you might explain what an ETJ is.
Oh, yes. Well, I can do that while we're talking. ETJ is the extraterritorial jurisdiction of cities that extends based on population a certain distance from the city limit lines. Likewise, always in recent sessions under challenge or attack for actually even removal of the ETJ. So I do expect we will see some of those bills again this session. But
the city's sphere of influence, if you will, the city's sphere of influence.
Okay. Exactly. So cities can regulate in their city limits and can apply certain regulations outside of their city limits within that sphere of influence, and then the counties take over from there. So I'm going to kind of start with House Bill 369, which was filed by Representative Tepper out of Lubbock. And this is one that, I would say generally when I look at bills, I tend to oppose bills that preempt or try to limit municipal authority. There's a reason government exists. There's a lot of good things that government does, and preempting that really, to me, well, it erodes local control. And what happens in Lubbock is very different than what happens, even outside of Houston. So different cities, I think, ought to have more discretion to adopt rules that work for them. So this House bill really prohibits cities from adopting rules for more than one dwelling unit, which I have abbreviated here as DU. And it adds a new section to, oddly, the subdivision statute. And I say oddly because this is section 212, or chapter 212 of the local government code, which regulates subdivisions, but chapter 211 regulates zoning. But this bill speaks a lot to zoning. So it's, to me, maybe brings in just Houston and Pasadena, Victoria, cities without zoning, and prohibits us from doing this as well. But it would preempt local authority by prohibiting the adoption or enforcement of an ordinance, of a zoning variance that is granted by a zoning board of adjustment, or any other regulation that would allow for the construction of more than one single-family dwelling unit on a lot. If it was zoned for that, and if it was zoned for single-family development, and if it was located in a subdivision with at least one developed lot. So to me, this is a bill that prohibits cities from interfering with established subdivisions or developing subdivisions that would change when somebody's bought in thinking, oh, there's always only going to be one home on every lot. It would prevent them essentially from adopting regulations for an ADU. And further talks about cities cannot change a zoning classification, regulation, or boundary line, or the allowed uses if it's contained within your zoning order. It's interesting, obviously, when I look at this from Houston, Pasadena, Victoria, which don't have zoning, we don't have areas that are zoned for single family, but some regulations do allow or do define a single family dwelling as a duplex. So is that more than one dwelling unit? So some impact.
So this bill would stop a municipality from, say, and this is happening all over the country right now, where the municipality decides that there is no single family zoning anymore. The need for affordable housing is such that you can have up to 6 dwelling units on any single family lot, or 2 dwelling units on any single family lot. Is that correct? And so this would preempt that.
That would preempt. And as you've noted, it's a trend nationally. Famously, Minneapolis has done away with single family zoning. This is almost the exact opposite of the California approach, which mandates that cities must allow accessory dwelling units or more than one dwelling unit. So we're seeing it West Coast and northern states in specific. But yeah, it's the polar opposite.
So if a city wanted to have ADUs, this bill would,
if they did not fall within one of these areas, we could not allow construction of more than one single family dwelling unit if it was zoned that way, and if it was located where one lot was developed.
Okay.
Now we could adopt an ordinance for more than one dwelling unit, and we have to send notices. And if many of you may remember the recent Austin decision about sending out notices on a universal zoning ordinance rewrite, development code rewrite, that, doesn't matter how many people you have to send notices to, you have to follow the notice requirements. So this bill does have an exception that, if an individual property owner wants to put in an ADU, they can come ask for it. but the city has to send out notice to everybody within 200 feet of that lot and obtain their consent by affidavit. So if you're in a subdivision, that could potentially be a fairly high number of consents. And if you're trying to do a broader regulatory change to allow ADUs in certain areas of town, within a certain type of zoning district, or creating a new zoning district, you have to notice everybody in that proposed district and then everybody around 200 feet again and get their consent. So it's a huge hurdle to overcome for a city to adopt broad-based ADU regulations, I think.
Is that the gist of the bill, or are there other aspects to it?
I think this is the gist of this bill.
Okay.
This one was fairly short. 878 has a bunch in it.
All right. Let's move on then.
So House Bill 878 was written by introduced by Representative Beth, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, Beth Suit, out of Angleton in Brazoria County, just south here of Houston. I think you introduced it, Fernando, as being a way to potentially streamline some of the processes. And I think this bill does have some of those elements. But on my side, primarily by limiting what cities can do on a regulatory basis. This bill has so much in it, as you'll see as we go through it, that I really start to wonder if it violates the one subject rule, that is a general rule of legislative development or of legislative introduction, that each bill should address only one topic. So this one you'll see here goes through quite a bit. So the first part of House Bill 878 would amend Chapter 211 of the Local Government Code by placing certain residential zoning limitations in certain municipalities. So you can see it's population constrained, cities over 85,000 population, which are located partially or completely within a county of 1 million or more. It's going to apply to a fairly large number of cities now. So it would amend by adding a new subchapter D. If you fit within this parameter, cities would not be able to adopt or enforce ordinances that require residential lots to meet these requirements you see there on the screen: lot size, width, depth, etc. Or you can't adopt any kind of a density ratio that would result in a developer achieving fewer than 31.1 units per acre.
It's pretty dense.
That is pretty dense. It prohibits the adoption of ordinances. Again, if you fall within this size parameter, this population parameter, it prohibits the adoption of the ordinances requiring small residential lots, which the bill defines as 4,000 square feet or less, to have setbacks greater than 5 feet from any lot line, covered parking, off-site parking, limiting the developable area by requiring more than 30% open or permeable space. He's in Brazoria County. This is, Gulf Coast. We need permeable space. So that's an interesting limitation to put on it. I think currently in the area here in the Houston, Galveston area, the average is 40% open or permeable space. So it would limit that in some of the areas here within the cities. Again, this is zoning, so it applies only within the cities, not within counties. But yeah, it's a very broad list of things that cities would be prohibited from regulating. I do know in Brazoria County, they're seeing a lot of rental communities starting to come in. I don't think they are necessarily small lot communities, but I'm wondering what's generating.
Can you go back to explain two things on those, on the limitation of bulk and articulation?
That's really what it says in the bill. So I'm not sure I can explain it further. I read that you can't prescribe maximum building bulk, meaning you can't have a floor area ratio.
And articulation requirements would be like design requirements. You have to have so many,
a design.
So if I want to build a big square box, bulky, 3 stories, I can.
It sounds like it the way it's drafted. Yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah, those two sound like they'd be open to interpretation. What exactly that means, I guess, building massing and articulation. But okay.
Yeah, I don't disagree. My favorite was anything else contrary to this section.
Right.
You talk about open to interpretation, but these are the types of things that hopefully with communication and testimony at the legislature, if this goes through the committee process and gets to public hearings, that, would hopefully be up for amendment.
Okay. Sorry, let's move on.
Yeah, we could help clarify. Cities retain the ability in this bill to require small lots to have a shared driveway. So if you have those small lots, they can share a driveway, and their permit fees are limited to a similar amount on other single-family residential. It is nice that he says it doesn't, affect any other zoning authority. That includes things like historic preservation. Mm-hmm. So, that element is preserved, has no effect on HOAs or private agreements. So if you have a deed restricted area, the deed restrictions, if they were more stringent, would supersede. And it does allow for a special exception process to allow a property owner to come in and seek some relief in some of the building requirements. So it's interesting because it's the first time from just a general land use perspective, not a variance standpoint, that special exception gets called out in the legislation. What's not clear, I think, is that does it go to the ZBA, or what kind of review does it go through? So these are some of the questions still remaining.
And that was applying to cities, and now this applies to county.
So part 2 of House Bill 878 adds a new subchapter to Chapter 231 of the Texas Local Government Code. Chapter 231, if you are not in a county that has one of those very limited zoning authority bills, there are A through M counties, 13. One of those has been repealed, but there are some counties that have some limited zoning authority where the legislature has granted that.
Go ahead.
Notably, historically, every legislative session has fought land use authority has fought granting land use authority to counties. So I found this really interesting that this is located, that this bill has been put forth. It's limited. It applies only to high density residential areas within unincorporated county territory. That is defined in the bill as 2 or more dwelling units per acre, which doesn't seem very high density to me living in a city, but could certainly be more than 2. Located in counties with a population under 1 million and not subject to other zoning authority in Chapter 231. So, for example, Lake Livingston has some limited zoning authority within that lake area. The county of El Paso has zoning authority for part of the Mission Trail and so forth. So if they don't have that other zoning authority, they can come in under this. And just provides very generally that county commissioners' courts can regulate the use of land for public health and safety or the quiet enjoyment of property, including adopting regulations on noise and signage and applying those within residential areas. one of my
So
favorite.
this addresses those county areas that have grown and become quasi little cities just simply because of the number of houses or development in the area.
Yeah, I think that's really what it does. One of my favorites was when a city manager retired and moved out to the county and then called me later and said, my neighbors next door have wild parties every weekend and play this loud music. And sometimes I think they're shooting guns. What can I do? And I was like, you know what regulation in a county is like. It's not there. This, I think you're exactly right, starts to address those developing areas.
And he was upset that he didn't have an invitation, I imagine.
I don't think that was late. I think it was probably not his kind of.
I understand. Yeah. Yeah, you want freedom. You want freedom for your lifestyle, but not necessarily freedom for everybody else's. So
less regulation. Okay. And yeah, that means your neighbors have less regulation as well. So it does add some language here about how the county commissioners court can require planning for these high density residential areas, but can't limit lot sizes to less than those 10,000 square feet or 100-foot in width parameters.
So that means it can't require larger lots than that, right? Is what it's saying. When it says limit lot sizes to be less than, right. But it cannot limit lot sizes to be less than. So you cannot say you want smaller lots, or
you can't say you want 9,000 square or 8,000 square feet.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Your 10,000 is a minimum lot size and 100-foot width. That's strange to be doing it from the legislative level, to be imposing that kind of language. That's usually a local thing, the width of a lot or the size of it. Yeah.
Again, I think it follows what the legislature's been doing in the last sessions, which is trying to limit local control. And we've seen it more at the city level than we have at the county, because the county hasn't had that much, particularly in land development. So House Bill 878 Part 3 talks about accessory dwelling units. And this is quite a lengthy section of the bill. It would add a new Chapter 249 to the Texas Local Government Code on regulations of accessory dwelling units by political subdivisions. Note that is not just cities. It applies to any political subdivision. And so that's a much broader category. I think it's going to catch certainly counties. So it's going to bring that within the scope of what counties can even do for ADUs, which, I think nationally and even locally here on a statewide basis in Texas, ADUs is kind of is seen as an easy fix or an easy way to help alleviate the housing crisis and the affordability problems that are out there. So this really, again, I start the dislike of this bill from the fact that it prohibits political subdivisions from stopping an owner to undertake certain things. It's very much directed at what a property owner can do. On the one hand, there are some things in this that I think do start to help to maybe streamline the process, because I hate to say it, but maybe by limiting some of these aspects, it makes it easy. It may make it easier to build. So this is going to require some further analysis, I think, by certainly the APA Texas Housing and Development character committees, but and you all in your daily practices. So this would prohibit political subdivisions from adopting or enforcing ordinances or regulations or rules that would prohibit owners from building ADUs, selling or leasing an ADU. Let's see, I added and requiring owner occupancy, requiring parking, etc., requiring setbacks of greater than 5 feet and that is actually a limitation on just the rear and the side. You'll see later that front setbacks can be regulated.
So it's the opposite of HB 369.
It's seemingly so.
Those two bills could not pass, or we'd have a lot of confusion.
Well, that's happened before.
One or the other. Really?
Sometimes that happens. I think, part of the overall issue, and I think you do sometimes end up with conflicting sections because I'm not sure how much or how easy even it is to monitor all the various bills and say, wait, this conflicts with this, or they didn't consider something else as bills go through the process and they're hurriedly amending it and holding hearings, sometimes late at night. You can end up with those conflicts. So the list continues of what cities are the type of regulations cities would be prohibited from adopting in reference to ADUs. We couldn't limit square footage to anything under 800, anything greater than 800 square feet or less than 550, less than 50%, too many numbers in that one,
Sure.
of the primary dwelling unit. Really can't, limits the height of the room to be more than 14 feet. I'm wondering if that's a barn dominium kind of an issue, that you can only use those for ADUs. I'm not certain where that height limitation comes from yet, but you can't impose restrictions based on age or employment. So it can't be your kids. You can't limit the requirement to have it be family members or an employment relationship with the owner. And you can't prohibit construction on two ADUs on lots if that lot is 10,000 square feet or greater. I can see this having some issues in cities that have large lot subdivisions where they are developed out as single family homes on 10,000, 12,000, 15,000 square foot lots. And it wants to put in ADUs. So that will.
One thing that's confusing is the sale of an ADU, since by definition it's on a fee simple lot of property. How would you sell just the ADU? There was a prohibition against prohibiting the sale. I understand the rental, but the sale of an ADU was a little bit confusing issue. Condominium, I'm not sure how that works, but okay.
And there's further language about that issue still in the bill.
Okay.
So just a couple of additional notes on ADUs in this, but we can regulate certain things. So I mentioned front setback. We can't have site plan review and other zoning requirements if it's generally accepted, applicable for that area. Cities could take affirmative steps to, I think, to the point about streamlining processes, publish, if you build one of these 15 kinds of ADUs, following these, you're going to get a permit. These are the codes that apply. Here you are, permit granted day one. Some cities are doing that already for affordable housing types. It brings back some authority if it's historic district or landmark property, certain types of water conservation lands. I read this to say we could also prohibit ADUs in this, but I haven't drilled down in that completely. So your mileage may vary. It is interesting here that after the exemption that we can't prohibit the lease of an ADU, but we can apply short-term rental regulations. So, is that a conflict inherent in this part of the bill that needs to be regulated out? And you saw, as you mentioned, Fernando, we can't prohibit, earlier we can't adopt a rule saying you can't sell it, but now it says we may prohibit it. A lot of this needs to be fleshed out and really thought through about how it will apply with the planners on this call or on this webinar on the ground. How would we have to implement this? This bill ends with some regulations about permitting for ADUs. They need to be processed ministerially with no discretionary review or hearing. But what if you're zoning at regulations that are generally applicable for site plans, which the bill specifically says you can enforce, require that to go through a discretionary review process through your zoning commission, potentially with a public hearing. So there are some things that don't seem to quite work completely in sync here. This applies a shot clock for deemed approval of a complete application if it's not acted on within 60 days. And the bill further provides that the Attorney General has enforcement authority. So, if there is a complaint, the political subdivision, if they are found to have violated any part of this chapter on just this portion on ADUs, the penalty is that the political subdivision cannot go back and collect a higher rate of ad valorem taxes, higher than the no new revenue rate of the prior year of the violation. So there's a potential tax loss. I don't know how great that would be, but it is a pocketbook hit. So
complicated sentence there. I'm not sure I understand it, but the bottom line is that there may be some some brakes put on tax increases, even if you increase the value of the property by putting an ADU on it, is what I'm gathering.
Yeah, if you have violated that statute, yeah.
Now, we would like to leave, if it passes, we'd like to leave a few minutes for questions. And since this is quite a hefty bill, I wonder if folks, two things. One, if you came in a little bit late, you may not have heard, but if you want APA credit for attending this webinar, please put your name and your email address in the chat. That way we can send that information to the right folks there to get your credits. If you have some questions, since we have a lot of people on, it'd be a little bit hard if people are unmuting and such all at the same time. Maybe you could write some questions into the chat box and I'll read them aloud. And then if some dialogue is necessary, we can try it in an organized way to unmute and mute people to speak. So if you have any questions, go ahead and write it into the chat box and I'll read them out loud. Now, what are the chances of either of these bills passing from your perspective, from your view?
Well, I didn't do the exact math, but again, if you look at, previous sessions, where there's been in the 87th session, there were 6,000 some bills that were introduced, and looking through, I think I have the number, but very few, a very low percentage of bills that are introduced do pass. I don't know that on these two specific ones I can, say yay or nay. We've had similar bills come up, in other sessions, other legislative sessions that haven't gone anywhere. Short-term rental, you mentioned it, and it's a very difficult concept to get through the legislature. County zoning or land use authority has been very difficult to get through a legislature. It depends on what else they end up getting focused on as well. So, yeah, I hate to try and predict what an elected body will do, whether it's a city council or the legislature.
Clifton Hall wants to know if there's what you see during in the current state of affairs without a House Speaker. Do you see any of these bills really being able to move forward?
The rules of both the House and the Senate, as far as committee assignments and what the Speaker puts forward to those committees, is absolutely governed and limited, I think, by that. So, yeah, I think that will make it tougher.
Shorten maybe the period of time. Which goes to Jayashree's question, which is, when should we start worrying about these and other bills becoming serious? What I think March, you said, is when you should start worrying.
Now. And I think,
okay.
I really do think, monitoring these early and often is really important. So, I certainly hope that, if you're with a city, that you work with your governmental affairs staff, even if that's just you, again, reach out to us about, APA Texas, because we'll be monitoring these main bills come through on development related and planning related issues. So you can access that information from the APA Texas website. Craig Farmer, if you've been on Craigslist for the many years that Craig has pulled that together, is also a good shorthand way of keeping an eye on what's happening with that. That's a lot of work. And of course, TML or the Texas Association of Counties sites also have them. If you don't have time going through that daily list of bills that comes out can just be mind-boggling. So, one way to do it is to rely on these other organizations, APA Texas, TML, TAC, to have those summaries of things that they see and that we analyze through and maybe do have a stronger chance or a greater likelihood of getting through, depending on where they fall within the process. You could rely on that. The other way is you can go to the Texas Legislative website. If you just put in capital gonna forget the website, we can send that to you. But if you go to the Texas Capitol website, you can set up alerts for topics that you are concerned about. And then you will get those alerts about when a bill is filed that would affect something. So
Yeah, that's interesting. I'll see if I can find that here while we're talking. But Melinda Ramos wants to know, have there been any companion bills filed for either one of these two bills?
Melinda, not that I'm aware of. That I have not seen those yet pop up on the site. I'm happy to be corrected, but yeah, I've not seen those.
I'm writing in the website here that you mentioned. It's capital.texas.gov.
Yeah, I was just going to do that too. Perfect.
Texas.gov. Okay, so that's now in the chat box. Karen wants to know if you think there might be a separate bill prohibiting local regulation of STRs. And you might explain what STRs are.
Yeah, short-term rentals. I think that we've been surprised among planners and municipal attorneys. I think we've been surprised that nothing has passed. I think you've got a mix of people who are concerned about local regulations who may be impacted by this, who would like to see it, and I'm speaking, legislators who would like to see regulations of short-term rentals. But then you have a strong property rights pull here in Texas that, we in the past two sessions when there've been bills on STR proposed, they have not gone anywhere. Maybe that dies down. There may be bills introduced, but they haven't gone anywhere previously.
Now, does APA Texas have a position on the two bills we were discussing, for or against? Or how do you?
We have not yet taken a position on those at this point. So we're just in the process of assigning bills and getting analyses done. What happens is when bills are assigned out within one of those committees that I mentioned, let's just say now I inherit the assignment for House Bill 870, then, we'll develop a position paper and it'll go back to the committee and we'll either, take no position, object, support or oppose, or support with amendments. So we look at ways to get through the bill.
But you will eventually take a position on the bills, or are you just providing information? Let's say, for example, you oppose one of the bills as an association. I would like to get involved in supporting that bill. Should I call you or avoid you?
Well, and that is one of the rubs of having an organization do this. Obviously, we have members who work on the developer side as well as the government side. So we can't take too strong of a position, or we try to respect that diversity of opinion in choosing which bills to support or strongly oppose. And I will say that I think what we've found in the last couple of sessions is that, it's important for us to find bills to also support. Right. We don't want to go into the session and every time we see a legislator, they think, here they are opposing opposing we try to do. And so that's the other reason for reaching out to, other organizations, and including, like I say, we had a great resolution of a bill, with working with TML and the Texas Home Builders Association. So, politics makes strange bedfellows. So, and absolutely, that's the other reason to get involved with one of these committees, because, we need to hear all sides.
Well, we have a couple of questions coming in. Kim, first question for you is, can people contact you?
Please. I'm happy for you to.
or by email?
I will put an
Or how?
email address in
I've got
here.
I've got your email address if you want the one at Houston, Texas.gov. I'll go ahead and
Okay.
post that for everyone, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so there's Kim's. Now, there are a couple of questions, one of which I'll be able to answer, and that's there was a question on whether this recording will be available for download later, and it will be. And you can certainly go see it at CNU Latino YouTube site. If you want all of those that have participated, maybe we'll send you a notification when it's up with a link. So in case any of you want to look at it or share it, you may do that. And then let's see, just maybe very quickly, let's see, is there an intent statement for each of these bills as to the issue they're trying to address? I thought I had that at the beginning, but then by the end, I knew I didn't. It was a very long, they were complex bills.
It's my favorite question every session. I want to know what problem they think they're trying to address. In part because then I think that could help us, especially at APA Texas, maybe help them write it the right way. Really understand.
Because there was a lot good and some stuff that's a little bit odd in each of the bills.
Yeah.
Like I was always thinking I could support this, and then I was thinking this really needs to be rewritten.
Right.
So that was it. I guess that's part of the process, and it'll happen. Thank you so much, Kim, for being with us today. We're right on the hour, so I know people have busy schedules and other things to do, including probably you. And I can tell you're a very, very busy person from your activities, are a bit overwhelming. So thank you so much. Thank everyone for participating. I want to thank CNU North Texas and CNU Houston for your
Thank
support.
you all. We look forward to talking more about the legislative session this year.
I hope so too. Bye-bye. I'll be ending the meeting for all.
Thank you all.